What's up, y'all? Sparta here. Oh, I thought that would work. I finally want to do my Note 10 versus G8 video. I took a bit more time on this because I wanted to get these in a better light than what I initially had them as. I recorded this video already, but I wasn't really that satisfied with it, and I didn't want to sound like one was hands down better than the other because that's not necessarily the case. But nonetheless, let's get into this. So, specs: Snapdragon 855 on both of these, 6 gigabytes of RAM, G8. Note 10 has 8 gigabytes of RAM. The G8 has 128 gigs of internal storage. The Note has 256 gigs of internal storage. This has UFS 3.0 storage. This has micro SD card expansion up to 2 terabytes. So pick your poison, whichever one you want. A 12 megapixel camera on the back of here, and as your regular lens, and a 13 megapixel wide angle lens. 12 dual 12 megapixel sensors that are the telephoto on the regular lens. The ultra wide angle lens is a 16 megapixel sensor. You have your fingerprint sensor on the back on here. You have it in display on the Note. You have your single LED flash on both of these. You have nothing on the right edge of the Note 10, whereas you have your power button / Bixby key if you decide to keep it as that on the Note 10, and you have your volume rocker. On the bottom of the Note 10, you have no headphone jack. You have USB-C, your microphone, your speaker, your S Pen, your SIM card slot, and your other two mics. The G8, headphone jack, mic right next to the USB-C port, and your speaker grill. You have another mic right here above the volume rocker. You have your Google Assistant button under that. You have your power button right here, and you have another mic right on top of there. And you have your SIM card slot right here on the side under the power button, where your micro SD card slot is as well. Okay. Both have front-facing cameras that are 8 megapixels. 1080p display on the Note 10, Quad HD Plus display on the G8, and 6.1 inches versus 6.3. So that's pretty much the specs. So let's go down the form factor and design. Honestly, what I would say personally is in terms of how both of these feel in the hand, for my personal use and how I feel about both of these, I like how both of these feel in the hand equally. Both are boxy and narrow, something I like for my gigantic hands. And let me do this better. And that's something that I feel not a lot of people will like, but for me personally, it's something that I do like a lot. I would say that personally, I prefer a bigger phone. Like, say if it's a V20 or something, right? My big hands pretty much feel at home with this. And that's not to knock the G8. It's a perfectly fine phone for my hand. Say, for example, the G6, that felt very cramped. And it didn't feel like my hand had enough space to grip the phone and not feel like I was just trying to make it comfortable. God, I'm fucking sorry. Both of these have face unlock as well. The G8 has a notch up here where you have your time of flight sensor and your camera right there as well. I look at it, it unlocks the phone, no problem. It does it in the dark, pitch black, just like the iPhone does. This, it will light up the screen as well to, illuminate your face and unlock, but it's obviously less secure because it's just an image of your face and not a full scan of your face. You also have, the gimmicks that the G8 was lambasted for, like the hand ID and the gestures and stuff like that. I don't use them. I did use them initially, though, and I did like them. I just don't feel like going fully in depth with those because it's just not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on how the phone is overall and, stuff like that. So, yeah. Both are good overall in terms of that stuff. In terms of screen, as I've said, the Note 10 has a 1080p, whereas the G8 has a Quad HD Plus or 3120 by 1440p display. I'd give the edge to the G8 solely because it's more detailed. You could tune both of these displays. Out of the box, the G8 comes at 1080p. You got to go into the display settings to turn it on to Quad HD Plus, but that's not really hard to do. So, yeah. Call quality / audio. The call quality on both of these are really good. I can't get Google Fi on here quite yet, but I have used it to take Google Hangouts calls and stuff like that. Stuff comes in clear. People can hear you. The speaker is nice and loud that's in the display. I don't really have any issues with it. And it's just a really nice, it's not something that I would say I prefer over just having a speaker that is outside of the display, like one that's on the Note 10. But it's fine. It's good nonetheless, and it sounds nice and loud. And that's honestly what matters. But I would probably give the slight edge to the Note because there's a more distinct place as to where to put your face. And honestly, that's pretty much the deciding factor there. In terms of speaker quality though, like listening to music and watching videos, I also give the slight edge to the Note in that regard as well because they're a little bit louder, and otherwise they're pretty much equal, but it ultimately depends on what kind of content you're watching and listening to as well. Keep that in mind. Some people tune their audio pretty low, so that's a very hard thing to have a metric on. But overall, both of these phones have really, really serviceable speakers, and they sound really good. The problem that I really do have with the Note 10s, though, is that, especially with Dolby Atmos on, you can hear that one speaker is clearly louder than the other, and it's essentially this top speaker right here is louder than this one, and it's kind of weird. And audio will switch, be louder here than here, and it's uneven, and that's something that kind of bothers me, but it's not enough for me to say, don't get the Note 10. Let's talk about fingerprint sensors as well. I just want to get that out of the way. I would say the G8 is definitely the superior fingerprint sensor because it's on the back. It's on the back. It's fast. My fucking finger is sweaty. I probably also got to rescan it. Oh, yeah. That is definitely what I got to do. Because I have it in a specific spot. But the fingerprint sensor on here is really good. It's really consistent. And that's something that I do indeed like. This, after an update, it's fast. But then it immediately goes back to being slow. And that's something that I don't understand. unlock it with the screen off, and that's really cool. It's really convenient, but it's something that I feel is like kind of because it focuses too much on showing the animation and not actually unlocking fast, and that's something that I feel is kind of dumb. But yeah, whatever when it comes to that. Both have 3,500 milliamp hour batteries in here as well. I'm going to get to that more in the battery section of this review, but I do want to say that right off the bat. Cameras. Cameras on these phones are really good. I would give the edge to the G8. Why would I do that? Well, I'm going to show you guys some photos here. Let me find some that are actually comparable. Give me 1 second. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to edit this video because I'm a bit busy right now, but I will bring up a couple photos in particular and talk about the differences that I've noticed and, obviously stuff like that, and the issues that I have with both cameras. So, off the bat with the Note, the issues that I always have with Samsung phones is that they oversaturate and they overexpose, right? And this is something that I've been having an issue with since the Note 5. Like, it's never really been resolved. It's always been there with Samsung phones, and I don't really see them fixing that anytime soon because they just don't seem to care. And no one else seems to talk about it. So with this particular cat right here, right? So overall, it's a really good picture. It's something that I wouldn't say I would be like, oh, I'm just not going to use this at all. This is bad. And this phone has had an update. Both of these phones have had updates recently. This has had an update in particular, and I took this picture after the update came out where it improved the camera quality. So I'm going to go back and use a different photo of another cat as well and show you guys. So the detail overall is better. I wouldn't say it's nearly as because I don't know what it is about this photo, but there's just a particular amount of detail and where the shadow is in the picture. It's the perfect amount of not being it's not overexposed. It's not over sharpened, which has always been a problem with LG phones. And it's just overall a really nice representation of how that looks. So let me go to, it's not in that folder, it's in this folder. So let me go to my cat. So while I'm dropping phones, I know I have a similar photo in here. A similar enough photo anyway. Because cats like to move around, so I guess that's comparable. Now these are in the same room. They're in my living room. And one is faced away from, actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show them to where they're similar enough. To show you guys how they handle in particular cases of light and stuff like that. So the G8 here, what it does is that there's a good amount of detail around, her fur and around her nose and stuff like that. Her whiskers are very detailed. There's a good amount of blur right where I'm not focused, and it trails off at a very satisfying, point in the picture. Samsung. Oh, Samsung. Now, God, my bad. Okay, that's better. Sorry. As you guys can see, there's a loss of detail. And this is obviously at the same window. She's sitting in her spot, laying in her spot on top of a chair. And it's literally in the same location. There's a loss of like detail around the fur in the same kind of place. I couldn't take the same picture, obviously, because of the simple fact that, like I said, my cats move around a lot, so that's kind of difficult to do. But I'm going to show a more equal comparison here, and it's going to be with this, I always forget his freaking name. The author of The Great Gatsby. I always forget his freaking name. But he's from Minnesota, that's why. He's from St. Paul, that's why they have a statue of him right by the Landmark Center. So, I took this photo same time, same day. And I just want to focus on the detail of... I'm going to figure out his name. Give me a second. F. Scott Fitzgerald. Sorry. It was going to bother me, so I had to figure it out. So on this statue, there's a good amount of detail. And this statue is not highly detailed or anything like that. It's actually pretty stylized. And both of these photos actually get a good representation of the amount of detail on the statue. But what you guys can probably clearly see is that the notes picture is more yellow, thus more saturated, right? And while this looks more gray, this looks bronze, and this is a more accurate representation of what the color of the actual statue. Now, some people don't care for that, and obviously there's like stuff like the note definitely does better with these lights over here, street lights over here and stuff like that, but that's not what I'm focused on. And over here, they both do a really good amount of blur. Something I would definitely say is actually a good feature of both of these, and it's something that is definitely appreciated, because a good amount of background blur is what a lot of people like, and I do want to bring that up. Both of these are really good when it comes to that. So in terms of cameras, to each their own, to be real. They're both really good camera performers. Both are really good in low light. Both of those photos of that statue were both taken early in the morning with no light at like 6 a.m. So there was there was light. Clearly the sky was blue, but it wasn't like there was a sun out or anything like that. So it was low light. Let me talk about performance and thermals here. So, and this is going to tie into gaming and stuff like that as well. Both of these have heat pipes in them. Pretty much something they decided to do after the whole kerfuffle with the Note 7, right? Both of these stay relatively cool. Like, they idle. And keep in mind, I'm in Minnesota. So, right now, my G8 is idling at 29 degrees Celsius. And my Note is idling at 38. Maybe it needs to update here. It's 29 as well, actually. They both are idling at 29 degrees. And since they're both relatively the same size, that's actually a good comparison. I play a lot of games on my phones. Something like typically I will play maybe 20, 30 minutes, right? And a game that I've been playing quite a bit recently is Marvel Contest of Champions. And for whatever reason, on my OnePlus 6T and even on my Note 10, they don't play at 60 frames per second. They don't play at a smooth frame rate. Which is really weird to me, right? Because these are flagship phones and they don't play at a smooth frame rate. The G8, however, oh boy, I'm going to load it up just so you guys can see. Now, the problem is I can't load them both at the same time because you'll be like, oh, someone's already logged into your account. So, yeah, I can't do it on both phones at the same time, but I'm going to show you guys exactly what I mean. So it's going to take a while for it to, get ready. So I'm going to go, let's check out someone with good enough effects. So the phone is probably not getting a good representation of that. But me moving this, see how smooth that cape animation is, for example, right? Look at how nice that looks. Now, I'm going to keep it open. No, I can't keep it open in the background. I just remembered. I gotta load it on the Note 10 as well. Now, watch what I mean when I say that the G8, for whatever reason, and even while playing the actual game, but I'm just doing this to show you guys just basic stuff, right? Just looking at a character model. Something as simple as that. So, as you guys can probably, let me move that. As you guys can probably see right here, it's choppy, right? It looks and I fiddle with all the game settings and stuff like that, and it's still like this. I go to Champions. I go back to Symbiote Supreme. And I focus on the same effect. Look at that. That is choppy. Very choppy. Now, keep in mind, this is Android, where stuff isn't really optimized that well for each and every phone. So take this with a grain of salt. But when I was also playing this on my iPhone XS, it was actually not much better than it is on my Note 10 and my V40 and my 60. Animations would be choppy. The one factor about the iPhone is that it loaded faster, but it was still at a lower frame rate. And that's something that I'm and keep in mind, this has a higher resolution display as well. So that's another thing to take into account. Higher resolution display, thus the graphics are at a higher resolution and it's moving at a much smoother frame rate. That is something that is a very interesting thing to keep in mind, right? Now, that doesn't matter if your battery doesn't last, right? And oh boy, let me talk about this. Something I alluded to in the audio portion of this review is my LG wireless, Bluetooth, my LG Tone Studios. I've been using these for 3 years. The Note 10 hasn't been great when it comes to staying idle and just listening to downloaded podcasts through Bluetooth. It's been kind of whack, to say the least. Now, this is something that I do So this is a metric that I can really live by. If you don't listen to a lot of podcasts, don't listen to this, but I also listen to a lot of quartered music as well at work. So keep that in mind as well if you do that. So, and that's really telling with the G8. But yeah, I go to work. And I do this breakdown all the time, but I go to work. I spend 3 hours on the truck, 9 to 12 unpacking 2 trucks. That's 3 hours of podcasts. My note would be at like 73%. My G8, like 80, 89. Like 87 at least, right? I get to lunch. My Note 10 would be at like 60. G8, just at like 80, 84 or something like that, right? And I use both of these on Wi-Fi at work as well, so just keep that in mind as well. I get off work 6 o'clock in the morning. The Note teetering on 40%. The G8 is still on 76. Now I fiddle with some settings in the background and stuff with my Note 10 because I was like, this can't be right. These both have the same sized battery. This can't be right. And I do get better battery life now. Now, say like today, for example, I use my Note 10 as my, basic phone, as my phone, and I use my G8 as my podcast and audio phone, right? And my Note now is like on 60%, and the discrepancy is actually way less. This is maybe on like 65, this may be on like 78. And that's a way better metric. That's something that I feel is a better discrepancy than what I was getting. A 30% discrepancy in battery compared to now being like a 10 to 12% discrepancy. That is way better. But in terms of battery, I would say the G8 is better. Like, it's crazy. And keep in mind, I have this on its highest screen calibration. And that is something that a lot of people, Quad HD displays, they drain battery. So I'm fine with the Note 10 just having a 1080p display. But here's my problem. I don't have a problem with a 1080p display on something like the OnePlus 6T, where it's a $650 phone. But on a $1,000 phone, the Note 10 is $1,000. It's like $990. Add tax. It's like $1,030 or something like that. So it's a $1,000 phone. A 1080p display on a $1,000 phone is some Mickey Mouse bullshit. And I'm going to just say that right now. Now, Samsung probably did that because we're not putting good enough batteries in our phones and stuff like that. But I'm not going to focus on that. So I'm not going to do any sort of conspiracy theories or whatever. I'm just saying the battery's just not as good as it is on the G8. And that's all I really got to say about that part. But I want to talk about overall who these phones are for. Now, what sucks about this is that the G8 got lambasted, and I'm going to talk about this in the review. It got lambasted over something as stupid as, it has air gestures. Yeah, it has hand ID. That's stupid. That's a gimmick. But, know who else has a gimmick? The Note. And guess what? That very gimmick, tanks performance with a phone with 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now, let me see how many Samsung services are in camera when I'm not using the camera for one. But download manager, I'm not downloading shit. Samsung Dex, I'm not using Samsung Dex. Samsung keyboard, that's not on. Why do these gotta be idle when I'm not using them? Contact storage, who am I contacting? Samsung Pass, whatever. Security shit. But the list keeps growing. Samsung push service, edge lighting I get, but 1.1 to 1.2 gigs used. I clear, right? It's using 3.2 gigs of RAM. I go to here, and it's only using 3 apps. Now LG definitely has the heavier skin, but RAM management is really good on LG's phone. Only 152 megabytes of RAM was used this whole time. Like, what? Whereas this was using 1.1 to 1.2. Now for a test, let's go back to the Note and see what it's using now. 310 already. I haven't been doing anything. But that's not to say it jitters and all this stuff. Like, it lags. It doesn't do that. But you can feel it slow down. And that's my problem, right? It feels slower. And you feel when you have to, I'm going to have to clear my RAM. And to do it, I'm going to show you guys again. You go into your device care. And you go into memory. Memory right down here, the third to the right. And now it's already using 800 MB. That's crazy to me. So overall, what are these phones? But yeah, the gimmick on here really is the S Pen. I use it, don't get me wrong. But a gimmick can be useful. Like, I don't know why the hell people think that just because something is useful, it's not a gimmick. The Note series was sold solely on the gimmick of, it has a built-in stylus and it's a big phone. Like, so it's a gimmick. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Like, the time of flight sensors on the front of the G8, sure, they can be used for hand gestures and hand ID and stuff like that, but they're also used for face unlock. Apple grade face unlock. And it's just as good from my memory, if not a little bit worse, due to the fact that you can unlock it with your eyes closed. But they can get to that in another update. I don't have to worry about that, so it's fine. But yeah, overall, this phone I'd say is for the person that wants a V series like experience, but doesn't want that big phone. You get the same headphone jack. You get the same camera features. Like, you may get one less camera and you don't get that telephoto lens, but you get the same camera features. And that's something that's really nice. But the problem that I have with the Note, and why I feel it's quite stupid to say that it's just a smaller Note 10, because I don't feel that way. You don't get that, that time of flight sensor on the back, so you get those stupid background blur and background effect stuff, like background effects in the camera app and stuff like that that don't work well. So I don't really care, it's fine. But you get 3 good cameras nonetheless. You get a 1080p as opposed to a Quad HD display, and you get a smaller battery compared to the Note 10 Plus. Now the G8 and the V50, for example, they're 2 entirely different phones. The Note 10 and the Note 10 Plus are named the same. This has more in common with the V50 in all the important points than this does with the Note 10 Plus. Sure, this has a 3500 compared to a 4000 milliamp hour battery with the V50, but the V50 is also a 5G phone. So that is something that I feel it makes sense. But the Note overall is just for somebody that loves the Note line, and I love the Note line. That's why I'm being so critical of this smaller hand version of the Note 10, because it's still it's still a really good phone. It's just, is it really? I feel Samsung phoned it in with this one. And you can tell by how nobody is talking about it. They're just talking about the Note 10 Plus. And that's something that sucks. But anyway, this is Sparta. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for the support. Damn, it's almost 40 minutes. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sorry. Like the video if you like it, dislike it, dislike it, share with people that are interested in this sort of content. Have a wonderful Monday, whatever time of day it is in your area, and see you later.